We were travelling along the road to Third Bridge. We're coming around a blind bend, and unfortunately someone in a Land Rover was also coming around a blind bend, and we connected.
When we sat down and realised what we had done.
Basically what we had done to repair the damage.
We had sent 2 girls off into the wilds of the African bush. Please, can we move? Now christened it the Strange Rover.
We haven't made it.
We were travelling along a narrow bush track, winding bush track near the Chobe River. And as usual, we decided not to take the main road, to take the back roads. It was just more interesting. We had the day. And I remember somebody commenting in the car, it might have even been Gwynn, I don't remember, but that this would be a good place for an accident because it was twisty, turny and twisty. My girlfriend Gwynn, her brother Lou and I had already completed the first part of an expedition through Lake Ngami, up the west side of the Okavango Delta and into the Chobe National Park.
Way up, bloody elephant. The animals.
We were now southbound to meet up with a group of friends that had begun their journey from the south. Travelling north, we were to meet in the Marimi Game Reserve, a 2-day drive through dense African savanna bushveld. And it was very sandy, and you had these high piles of sand each side of the car. So you're kind of trapped in the actual path itself. The vehicle almost steers itself. And the next second, a white Land Cruiser comes from the opposite direction, and I just swing the wheel around. The vehicle goes up the sandbank and kind of comes back. The Land Cruiser did exactly the same. It came up, swung sideways, and we had a 3/4 head-on collision.
As you can see, the car is pretty damaged. What we're waiting for now is for the police to arrive, and then the people that we rode into are going to tow us to Ngoma Bridge, and where Helen and I are going to try and get down to Third Bridge to let Mark know that this has happened, for him to come up here, pick us up and tow Lodi back down to Johannesburg.
My speed was probably not more than 20 kilometres an hour, and the Land Cruiser was probably a little faster. Well, it demolished the front of the Range Rover. The Range Rover the front end was torn to pieces. The entire bonnet was just ripped up. And the driver was driving far too fast. And they live in the bush, and they would just go from, for us it's a game viewing drive, we're driving slowly. For them it's going from A to B, it's part of their work, part of their job. And, well, anyway, the Range Rover was a terrible, terrible mess. What to do now?
The guy that we bashed into was actually a government official, and he was ticked off about the accident. Not that he'd had an accident, but the fact that he'd had another accident. His first accident had happened here, Savuti. He'd been camped, government business, doing something, and an elephant called Baby Huey had opened the back of his Land Cruiser with its tusks to get at whatever. And he was really ticked off because now this was a whole lot of paperwork, and he was going to have to do a please explain to his boss about the elephant, and now he slammed into us. So he had the serious matters about this elephant and this accident.
Well, we had a tow to the Ngoma Gate, which is the gate, one of the north gates to the Chobe National Park. And at the gate, we made some very quick decisions.
What were the consequences of not meeting Mark and Sarah? Well, number one, Mark and Sarah wouldn't have known what had happened to us, but they knew that Andrew was bushwise enough, so they would probably have just gone on with their holiday and headed off back to Johannesburg. So the first consequence was, if we couldn't get the vehicle up and running, what would we do? We really needed Mark and Sarah's support. So the question was asked, who's going to go and tell Mark and Sarah? And the four of us looked at each other, and to me and Helen, it was logical. Andrew needed to fix the car, and Lewis was a boy, so he needs to fix the car. So, hey, we'll grab a pair of knickers and a toothbrush and a tent and one sleeping bag. I'm not sure what we were going to do with one sleeping bag, but anyway, that's what we grabbed, and we said, we're up. I'm a Gryffindor, I'll go. And Andrew and Lou kind of were a bit, and just at that moment, a truck, a Land Cruiser arrived with a white guy and white women in it, which was rare, and and they had space. It was a pickup, and she took one look at us and said, well, my name's Brody, can I help you? You know, you guys look like you've got a problem. And we said, well, we do. We need to get to some friends in Third Bridge. And her eyebrows started to rise, and she went over and she talked to the guy, and turns out his name was George Culf, and they were Canadians, and they were based in Savuti doing lion and hyena and elephant research. They took one look at us and said, listen, if you need a lift to Savuti, we can help you. Hop into the load bay, which we did. And within minutes of this decision having been muted, who's going to go, Helen and I were off.
So now with Gwynn and Helen gone, we had time. Lou and I had time. It was our job to try and repair the Range Rover.
This is Ngoma Gate. The accident happened just down there, about 2 kilometers. And Helen and Gwynn have gone off to try and get a lift all the way to Third Bridge to meet Mark and his group. And with any luck, they'll have some success. Mark will be able to come back home, and if we can't get this thing actually driving, we might be able to. But if we can't get it driving, get Mark to tow us all the way home.
If life seems jolly rotten, there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing.
We'd probably gone about 2 Ks, and the first bit of doubt started to bloom in my chest. Where was Third Bridge? I'd never been to Savuti in my life. I had no idea really where Third Bridge was. I had this vague idea, oh, it's in the Moremi. You know, that's like saying, oh, it's in New York. You know, just put them in New York and they'll find it. George and Brody made it very clear they were stopping at Savuti. So from Savuti to Third Bridge, we had to hitchhike or find our way. And we'd already seen at the gate at Ngoma that George and Brody had been a blessing, because it was a couple. They didn't have kids. They had space in their vehicle. Everybody else that we had sort of seen and tried to stop to flag down in that instant where we had made the stupid decision, that their vehicles were full. They had no room for hitchhikers.
We got down to business. I had a box this big full of wire and nuts and threaded bar, and you can every known thing that I thought might be useful in the event of needing to strap, tie, fix, repair and reattach something to the vehicle should it fall off on my trip. This is Ngoma Gate, and it's in this exact wood that I rebuilt the Range Rover. And if I took a bulldozer now and bulldozed this entire area, somewhere buried under the soil is a very twisted Range Rover bonnet. That's all I had. I had no access to towns, spares, nothing, absolutely nothing. And we had to try anyway and get the vehicle rolling again. We had no idea. Because I'd had experience in rebuilding the front of the car because of my previous accident, I knew how it all went together.
Basically what we've done to repair the damage is to construct a supporting arm that runs down to the steering box and basically stops the radiator from moving backwards, makes it fairly stiff. We also tied it up with wire down here, piece of wire going down there, which will stop the bottom of the radiator moving in a backward direction. We've tied up the brake lines up here fairly securely, still leaving enough room for the suspension to travel. We've tied up all the connections so they don't fall around. We've also fixed the fan. The blade down there was quite badly bent. We heated it up in a fire and hammered it straight. The radiator wasn't punctured, but what did happen is the expansion tank was holed, and it was holed in the bottom corner down here, and we've put a lot of Prattley's putty in there, and that seems to have sealed. Put a bungee cord over the top and tied it with string. Basically the string just stops the thing tilting backwards, and it's on a piece of foam to prevent the vibration working the Prattley's putty free. The other damage to the car, which is fairly serious, if one looks down there, one sees the tie rod end and steering bar are fairly badly bent. That's the steering bar, and the tie rod end, which is a little more difficult to see that it's bent, under there is slightly bent down, and therefore has affected the wheel alignment fairly seriously. That kind of repair I hope to be able to do when Mark comes.
But there was engine damage, there was cooling system damage mainly. Could I get it running again? I don't know. I really didn't know. And that's why Gwynn and Helen had left.
So anyway, we made it down to the research camp, and George and Brody, invited us in, and we sat in the mess tent, and George said, "I've got some urgent business to go and do. I'll be back." But there was a very, very heavy atmosphere over the whole camp, and asked tentatively, is there a problem? Is there an issue? What's actually happening? And Brody muttered something about shooting Baby Huey. And my eyes lit up because, Baby Huey, second time I've heard about him today. What's the story? And it came out that he was this rogue elephant destroying Savuti. He had flattened a few vehicles. He destroyed an ablution block. He had absolutely torn tents apart, and it was literally a matter of time before he killed someone. So it was imperative that Huey be dealt with.
Savuti has had a history of trouble with elephants. So they built this concrete wall. Elephants cannot get inside. There's of course the ridge on the outside. Elephants are going to find it very difficult to climb over such a ridge. They've got a jenny, they've got solar power with electrical, and in fact it's a proper camping ablution block that they have made elephant proof. Quite effective defences against marauding elephants looking for water. These rocks embedded in concrete stop their feet getting close, and the tap right under here, and a lump of elephant proof concrete.
George arrived an hour or so later looking very somber. It was quite interesting. When I arrived back in Johannesburg months later, I was going through a wildlife magazine, travel magazine, and there was an article about the shooting of Baby Huey, and the journalist was a real bunny hugger, was like, how could they do this? It's wrong, and they shoot these animals so lightly. And my heart just went out. I thought, if you had seen George and Brody that night in Savuti, you would never say, it was all so gung-ho. They felt it. They really, really felt the shooting of Baby Huey.
The other thing we had to deal with the guilt. when we sat down and realised what we had done. We had sent 2 girls off into the wilds of the African bush. Neither had, they had some bush experience, but not enough to handle that kind of being abandoned, that feeling of just, with no support at all in the bush. And we realised it was a foolish decision. And we felt terrible. We would talk to each other and say, that was such a stupid thing to do. Lewis and Gwynn should have gone, or Lewis and Helen should have gone. It just, because yes, I needed another hand to try and fix the truck, but anybody could have done that. I'd had to stay behind to fix the truck. Nobody else could fix the truck better than I.
Outside the camp, there's this dead elephant. Tusks have to be removed. Was it I think CITES, the prohibition of trading in elephant ivory was in force at the time, so the tusks had to be removed. We saw these massive, beautiful tusks, absolutely gorgeous. You could see why people went crazy for ivory. For me, ivory only really looks good on an elephant, but these sweeping tusks and this bloody stump at the other end, it was really, really horrible. And George reckoned at the time, that this was in 1989, he reckoned that those 2 tusks, even back then, would have earned about $24,000 US.
At this point, I'd like to say that both Lou and I feel a little guilty that we sent the girls off to do the running around and finding Mark. And in retrospect, I think it would have been a better idea if perhaps Lou and Gwynn had gone, or Lou and Helen had gone.
Fortunate enough to organize a lift for them with an American scientist who's doing research into the elephants and lions of the Chobe. He took them down to Savuti and promised to organize a lift from Savuti to Maremi for them. And he looked like a fairly decent fellow, and I have an idea they got to Mark's campsite last night, and we hope to see them within the next couple of hours. And then we'll see what they say about being left in the bush all by themselves on a great adventure.
So there was a lot of stress around camp. Add us to it, we had taken a walk from the research centre while George was out doing his thing, and after our discussion with Brody, to see if we could hitchhike a ride down to Third Bridge. And full campsite, no empty vehicles, no space for 2 really, really stupid girls. So we headed back to the camp and said, look, we can't get a lift, but no worries, we'll take care of ourselves. We've got a tent, we've got a sleeping bag, we've got a toothbrush, got a pair of knickers each. We'll go and camp and see if we can sort ourselves out. And George and Brody kind of looked at us, and anyway, they said, fine, off you go. We arrive in the campsite and we open up the tent to pitch it, and there are no tent poles. No tent poles. And there's no way in Savuti, at the best of time, that you would sleep under the stars. You get chowed by a hyena, no question asked. And with Baby Huey rotting out there, with all these predators coming into town, there was not a chance in hell we could. So what do? Limp back to George and Brody. We're really, really sorry. Now we're a burden. Now we're really, really feeling the weight of the stupid decision that we'd made.
Several days later, we started getting messages and finding out what was happening to them in the bush while we stayed and put the car together.
Every moment we were in the camp, faffing around, was at the back of our minds were, have Mark and Sarah arrived at Third Bridge? How long are they going to stay? We knew they were on a time pressure. When do they leave? When do we find ourselves utterly stranded? The next day, so we slept the night with George and Brody. They found a couple of beds for us in a tent, and we slept the night there and had breakfast with them in the morning. And again, we walked down to the main Savuti campsite, No deal, nothing. No vehicle, nothing we could hitch a ride in. So back to George and Brody, and we kind of brainstorming, what should we do? So someone suggested, well, why don't you tie a message, put a message in a beer bottle, and we get one of the local pilots to toss it out of the 206 over the campsite at Third Bridge. Maybe your friends find it. I mean, that was where we were at with this whole thing. So Helen and I dutifully write a letter, the message in a bottle. Instead of tossing it over the side of the ship, we stick it in a beer bottle, give it to a pilot, and off he goes. He later reports, yeah, tossed it over the campsite. Don't know if your friends are going to find it. Thick bush, like they're really going to find it. We met somebody else who was heading back up to Ngoma. We said to them, please won't you just get a message to Andrew and Lou? They're there with this, crashed Range Rover. Please tell them we're okay. We're still at Savuti, still trying to, get a lift, but, all's well.
It's 4:30 today, the 2nd of May, and I happened to stroll up to the gate when I heard a vehicle arrive and got handed a message by 3 people who've just come from Savuti. And the message reads as such: Dear Andrew and Lou, we are still at Savuti. We are being well looked after by George and his wife. They are biologists. There are no lifts to Maremi. They are waiting for a plane to the Kwai River tomorrow. We are going to hitch a lift to Third Bridge from Kwai River. We have arranged to have a message dropped to Mark and Sarah at Third Bridge by a passing plane to tell them to stay there. Hope all is well with you. Love and miss you both, Gwynn and Helen.
But with each passing hour is this panic. What are we going to do? We're stuck here. Yes, I suppose we could hitch a ride back to Ngoma with George and the Tusks, sit in the back of the load bay with these 2 Tusks. There wouldn't be very much room for us, and they were bloody and horrid, really. We could do that, but it defeats the whole object of why we had come here.
So now, having received a message that they were okay, we felt a little better, but we still felt guilty. By this stage, we had got the engine running.
Life's a piece of shit when you look at it.
We needed to take the vehicle, we had now christened it the Strange Rover, on a test run, mainly because we had run out of beers, and I was a smoker at the time, and I wanted to try and get some camel filters.
We managed to get some beers at a local trading store, and they had some perfectly good Peter Stuyvesant cigarettes there, or Rothmans, or Lexington, or even their own local brand of filterless cigarettes, but this man declined, rather battle it out with his 2 Camel that he has left.
So we test drove the vehicle, and actually we realized, I think we can get it home. It was about a 1,200 kilometre drive home, something like that. I reckon it would make, if we kept the speeds low and just nursed it back home, we could get home.
Maybe they haven't got the vehicle fixed. And then we get back there and they say to us, well, you failed. How the hell are we going to get home? You didn't get Mark and Sarah. You've let us down. So that wasn't an option. Turning back wasn't an option. We had to push through with this idiotic thing that we'd started. So it was back to Brody and George. Gee, what they were stalwarts. I don't know what Providence landed us in the lap of the 2 people in Botswana who would take 2 lame ducks and really help them through this stupid situation. So they said to us, well, there's another alternative. Let's see, Willie's camp. Willie's flying in, and he's got guests coming in, and he's going in to his camp, to get everything ready for his guests. It's very close to Third Bridge. You can maybe fly in with him, and once you're at his camp, you can then find a way, hitch a ride there, walk, whatever, from his camp to Third Bridge. Oh, please let this work. Please let this work. George takes us to meet Willie. And as I remember, he was a very wiry, taciturn Swiss guy. But he agreed to take us. And he didn't charge us, which was very kind of him, because I think we had about 20 pula on us. I mean, we were so well prepared for this expedition, really.
Subsequent to that, these chaps said to us that Gwynn and Helen had got a lift, in fact, to Third Bridge, and are at the moment with Mark and Sarah, and we expect to see them sometime tomorrow or the next day.
Next morning, we fly in with him, and we say goodbye to George and Brody, big hugs, and off we go. We get into this plane, and we fly over the Delta. Stunning. My first flight over the Okavango. Absolutely.
So we decided to drive it to Serendella, the campsite, where we would all end up anyway.
We are now going to strike camp here and go down to Serendella, where the surroundings are a little bit more pleasant, and just sit and wait it out.
Before we left a message at Ngoma saying that when the Gwynn and Helen and our mates, our friends, came through, they would get a message moved to Serendella.
Anyway, we arrive at Willie's camp, and he opens the 206 and says, off you go. There's no one at his camp. He's arrived ahead of time to, call in his staff and what have you. And it's early in the morning, and Helen and I kind of look at each other, and so we say to him, well, where is Third Bridge? And he points, it's in that direction. How far? No, it's about 750 meters, a kilometer. Just walk in that direction. Okay. In the African bush, we've proved how inept we are, girls walking in the African bush in the early morning. Let's just hope we don't bump into some lion or,
I'd like to introduce you to our game guard, Alan, who's been our host while we've been here. He's looked after us and made sure that we've been comfortable and explained the workings of the game reserve to us. We had a jolly good chat at the fire with him last night about poachers and people who hunt and smuggle drugs and whatnot, and he's been very, very pleasant, very friendly to talk to. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks.
Okay,
Good.
and we'll see you again one of these days, huh?
Okay.
Same time next year.
Okay.
So we stomp off in this general direction, and we hear voices, and we think, oh, we might, we actually might be getting there. And we walk into another lodge. We'd gone off entirely the wrong direction. Fortunately, we arrived at another lodge, and it was filled with American tourists and their host guide, Rolf. And these American tourists were all women in late 50s, retired. They took one look they were having breakfast. They'd just up having breakfast. They took one look at these two bedraggled girls. Both looked like we'd been pulled through a bush backwards. No change of clothes, as we've already said, 2 pairs of knickers. They took one look at us, and you could just see them melt as our story came out. We were engulfed in arms and pulled to breasts and dragged to the breakfast table. And before we knew it, new chairs and placemat, bacon, eggs, whatever we wanted. And we were kind of so overwhelmed by it. All we wanted, because I think 3 days had passed at this point, and how much longer were Mark and Sarah going to be there? So all we really wanted to do was scream at the top of our lungs, please, please, just take us to the public campsite in Third Bridge. But no, we were breakfasted with orange juice and who knows or what all else, and then we were going on a game drive. And Rolf, their guide, said, we'll make sure that we swing past Third Bridge on the game drive. So we get into the vehicle with all these mother hens, and they had husbands there, but husbands don't worry about bedraggled girls who step out of the bush with branches and twigs and leaves in their hair. This game drive, sitting on the open back Land Rover, and we sitting and we waiting, and we stop for every impala, every little brown job bird. We stopped for everything, and just like, please, can we move?
Well, here we are at Serendella. We've made a few more modifications to try and get us home.
We finally get to Third Bridge. Campsite is empty. nothing.
First of all, we put this 4-pound hammer underneath the radiator to prevent the radiator moving up and down on the right-hand side.
It's that moment where you think, we haven't made it.
The other thing, the winch cable we've taken from the winch up and supporting the radiator as a safety to stop the radiator moving back and hitting the fan.
And that it was like I could just feel the blood rush to my feet, that sense of utter failure, but not just failure, but failure, because now we were in Third Bridge. Andrew and Lou were 300 odd kilometers away from us in Serendella.
We went to Serendella and waited and photographed the ants, photographed the mongoose, and had a couple of days and actually had quite a nice time.
Had a fairly eventful morning, woken up by baboons and monkeys raiding our camp. They'd managed to open the cool box and made off with a couple of rolls of film. Don't know what they tasted like, but we managed to get all of them back except for one. Some friendly Dutchmen camped down there, some very noisy but friendly Dutchmen camping down the road there. Gave Lou a lift, and Lou bought bacon, eggs, some beers, and we just filled up on bacon and eggs and fried banana, and sitting here keeping close watch behind us for the monkeys.
And no Mark and Sarah. We have to now find our way back, and it was just crushing.
You big bobble.
And these old ducks took one look at us again, and they weren't having this, and they rustled up Ralph, their guide, and said, no, there's got to be someone in charge of this camp. Let's go and find whoever is in charge of this camp. So who's going to deny, these women in full force? So off we went, and we trailed through the camp, and in the distance I saw a large blue tent, and recognition spiked. I said, I've seen pictures of that tent. I know that tent. Can we drive towards it? Stopped at the tent, and it was very, very familiar. No vehicle, no people. Unzipped the tent, poked around inside, and Mark was studying medicine. And I saw a first aid kit, quite an expansive first aid kit, and something just said to me, this is it. Convincing our mother hens that it was actually okay to leave us alone in the bush next to this empty tent, turned out to be they weren't having it. So their game drive stopped, their long-suffering husbands, they all stopped, and everybody waited and waited, and eventually we heard the sound of a V8, and Mark and Sarah's Range Rover appeared. Well, they looked at us, what? This crazy? And it was a fabulous reunion, and all the mother hens hugged everybody, and I think their guide was so relieved to be rid of these two stupid girls, and they went off on their way. We told Mark our sad story, and they had their tents down, camp broken up, and we headed back. High-speed game drive. I think we camped overnight once, but on that game drive, we stopped for virtually nothing. We saw, fleetingly, we saw everything. Lion, leopard, masses of hippo, elephant, buffalo. I think we saw it all in a blur as we rushed back to Serendella. We stop at Serendella and we bounce out the car, and Helen and I are so, we've done it.
Hello.
Like, we're just so cool.
Hello. Hi.
Like it?
Yes.
How was the trip?
And Andrew is cool. He is uncommunicative, stony, and I'm thinking, uh-oh, what have I done wrong?
Got a flight into...
Did you go to Pyro?
No, we didn't go to Fire River, and then we got to a little camp right next to Third Bridge, and then we got a lift. It's a long story.
I've obviously screwed up big time here. I don't know what I've done. So I go across and I grab Lou and I say to him, what's going on? He said, I think the word you're looking for is guilt. And the lights went on.
Hi.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hello. Hello.
How's it going? Well, how's your journey?
Lou?
We got here very quickly.
Lou?
Hi.
Cheryl. Hello.
I did. So what?
It was a long drive.
Hello, Helen. We got here very, very quickly, I must say.
Are you pleased to see us?
No, we were having a ball.
Well, a few words, a hug and a kiss, and well, 30 years later, we're still together. So couldn't have been all bad.
You're not even going to offer us any money.
I think we got 2 muddies.
Aren't we popular people?
Hello. You have a nice time.
We were worried about what the girls' reaction would be, because we realized, of course, that, you know, they could be really ticked off, because we had obviously had a much easier time of it than they had.
Oh, wonderful.
Did you?
And we thought they would be really, really ticked off.
Some interesting people, had a great game drive.
Had a nervous breakdown.
But all they were really was extremely sarcastic.
Flew over the
Otherwise you're bored stiff.
Oh, we had 5-star accommodation
all the way. Saw the other side of safari life.
Clean clothes every day.
Hot showers.
Sounds like you had a better time than we did, eh?
Yeah, let's do it again.
And it all ended well.
I think you're grossly unlucky. We have been so worried. We've been hoarding our last few beers.
I often think back to that Baby Huey experience. There are experiences in your life that are defining.
Great being back, all you guys, and the whole happy family back together again.
For me, that was one of them. It was a stupid situation, yes, but I proved to myself as a, you know, in my early 20s, I proved to myself that I can do anything, really. If the will is there, if the determination is there, if you know what you want, I can make anything happen. And it convinced me that I always knew I could never settle for the ordinary. Ordinary was not part of my vocabulary. But that experience, I knew from then that I would always have a Baby Huey experience going in my life. Perhaps a little more structured and a little better prepared, although not really. As long as you've got a clean pair of knickers, you can do anything.
Now, the drive home.
This is a cabbage. It was bought in Johannesburg about 3 weeks ago. It was travelled through Gaborone, through Francistown, through Maun, along to Lake Ngami, through Shikawi, through the Caprivi Strip, back into Botswana, and ended up at Serendella in the Chobe finally 3 weeks later, after having done a detour through Zimbabwe. We've now decided to eat this poor animal, vegetable, mineral, whatever, and we do it with much regret because it's probably one of the most well-travelled cabbages in Africa. So we'll put it in the potjie tonight and see if there's any sustenance left in it. We did try to organise visas for it, but we thought we might be antagonising the local border guards if we did ask them to stamp it, so it remains unstamped.
No front end, nothing on the front of the car. Surely the police would stop us. This was no longer a roadworthy vehicle, didn't have any lights and things in the front. Well, the Botswana authorities didn't really mind. When we told them what had happened, they didn't really, you know, they were cool about it. That's what's so nice about Botswana, actually. The people are cool, the police are nice, and everybody's nice. They're just nice. As we went through the border post, leaving Botswana and returning back into South Africa, the official said, "Oh man, what happened?" I said, "It was the roads. Your roads here, they're so bad. It fell apart." I kid you not, he then looked at me and said, "Was the Nata Mound Road?" Now, the Nata Mound Road was actually the road we had actually travelled on the way to Maun, between Nata and Maun. Very, very notoriously rough white calcrete road that breaks. It's a vehicle breaker. And it's infamous to the point where even the border guard knew about the Nata Mound Road. And at first I said, yes, it was. And then I said, no, it wasn't. And I explained that we had had an accident and that we're making our way home. And we managed, with only a single repair stop, driving, and I noticed this tiny, tiny puff of blue smoke from the engine. And I immediately put it into idle, turned off the road, checked. The radiator had moved at the bottom and moved towards the spinning fan belt, and it had nicked the rubber pipe, hence the blue smoke, but not hold it. So a little bit of work, and that was the one and only stop, and I managed to get the Range Rover all the way home. And didn't need to do any repairs on my relationship with Gwynn.